we ask ourselves, what is the concept of being? Let me explain that word concept. What does a woman do when she conceives? Her body takes the sperm of her husband. He provides something, she provides something, namely the egg. And we call that a conception. The human intellect, we also call interconception. What happens in the intellect? Say the tree comes, or say Bob comes into the senses. We see Bob in the senses. In the intellect, it has Bobness come into the intellect, and the intellect, the Bob provides something, like the sperm, and the intellect provides something. It provides the immateriality. Or indeed, you could even call it the spirituality of the concept. An image is something which you can sense. We sense the images. We deal with this in philosophy of man, by the way, of philosophical psychology. But the intellect grasps the immateriality of man, the oneness of man, this concept. The intellect provides something, and reality provides something. So we speak about, I had a concept. We have a conception in the intellect, just like in reality. So the intellect conceives universal man. So if I see this gentleman here, or this young woman here, or in New Zealand, I just had a pleasant cup of coffee with a lovely Maori lady, the native New Zealanders. I had a rather funny misunderstanding, as a matter of fact. We're talking about the New Zealanders have a very strange way of saying things. And they pronounce I's rather like U's in a way. So she turned to me, we'd just different words. How do you say this? And this is how we say it. Then she turned to me and said, what about sex? Pardon, I said. What she was saying is, what about sex? I was startled for a second. What about sex? My brother and his daughter, whose motel we were staying in, looked up and Margaret giggled because she knows something of the Maori language. Anyway, I've forgotten my point. But the intellect conceives, and it's properly said of the intellect as much as it is of a woman's womb. The woman provides something, the man provides something. The tree provides something, and the mind provides something. You see all these cows, but the idea of different degrees of apprehension, different degrees of universality. You could start off and say, I see Bossy out there, or Spot, or something else. But I understand cowness. Now I abstract something else. Abstract, got to get used to that word, Tractare in Latin means to draw. A tractor is something that pulls things along. Ab means away from. The S is thrown in from habit by people using the word. It's very difficult to say abstraction. So the word's thrown in, the letter's thrown in to make it easier. Often called phonetic assimilation. Abstract. So the intellect draws from something. What does the intellect draw out of the cow? Mammal, for instance, or cloven hoof, or maybe a ruminant. It's got more than one stomach. So why they call it a mammal? Because it's got something that mama has. And use your imagination, I'm not going to explain. Something that mama has. Breasts, in other words. Mama feeds from the breasts. So that's why it's called mammal. But we abstract from cow, mammal. We abstract from it, choose the cud. We extract from it, ruminant, which is the same thing as chewing the cud. And we abstract from it, hooved animal, or horned animal, etc. We abstract, for instance, vegetative likeness. Plants have three vegetative powers: nutrition, growth, and generation. Animals have nutrition, growth, and generation. But they have senses on top of that. Man has nutrition, growth, and generation, plus the senses, plus intellect and will. So we can abstract those things. The intellect can abstract or draw away from Bossy or Joe, etc., can draw those things away.
Is this like a Greek word?
Which is that?
AB.
AB. No, that's Latin.
Latin?
Yeah. Abstract. Just the A. It's usually done. But the
Strat.
pardon?
Strat. Is that Latin?
No, tractor. Yeah, that's Latin. Tractare, to draw. A tractor, for instance. Or they put in the hospital, they put a leg in traction. It's pulling on it. Well, what happens about this concept of being? What happens about it? Is it a genus? In other words, the word genus, by the way, is a very interesting word. I had a girl come to me one day. I wouldn't mention these Latin and Greek words. You scare the students off. Me, I understand them, she says. I thought, you pompous idiot. I didn't say it, but I thought it. She was far from the best student in the class, by the way, it turned out. But genus, you see, there are three sets of continents. They're pronounced this way. Lips only. Oh, I'm sorry. What have I done here? Should be a K. Lips and voice. B, d, g. Lips, voice, and nose. M, n, ny, like onion. I'll do that properly. Something like that. That's how it should be. Anyway, it's the tendency in Northern Europe is to go this way. Southern Europe is to go this way. So, genus, genus, K-no, K-N-O. In Latin, gnosco means to know something. In English, K-N-O-W. So, this G or GN, gnosco. Southern, the Mediterranean countries are down here. The German countries are more up here. The evolution of languages. So the word genus is exactly the same word as kind. We've got in English, kind. So, genus is just the K, is sort of pushed it away. Genus, kind. A little bit of a sound shift with some of the other letters.
Gnosco is to know.
I know, yeah.
Is there a relationship between that and Gnostic?
Oh, yes. Oh, they pretend to be knowers. Yeah, they're the knowers, you see. They've got great knowledge, etc. Anyway,
I looked up that word up in the dictionary, like I told you earlier.
the word genus.
Right. And I have any class or kind with common attributes.
Yeah, well, I was about to explain that. Now, there's another word, species.
Right. I
Species.
got that too.
Species in Latin means face or the look of somebody. The species, you know by looking at them. What species is that? Oh, kangaroo. But what kind is it? What genus is it? Now that's more intellectual. We have to understand relationships. A cow doesn't look like a goat, but you'd say they're both mammals. Or a camel doesn't look like a sheep, but they're both mammals. That's intelligible. Species means the look of something. So species, speculum in Latin means a mirror. So species means you can tell what a thing is from the look of it. But genus, you have to understand something more, you see. That's more the intellect coming into operation. Well, we ask ourselves, what about the term being? Is that a genus? can't be. Because to get a genus, you have to take species and add something to it. Or different species, there's something be added, but whatever you add is a being, so there can't be a genus. It's impossible. Is it equivocal? Is it equivocal? Is it to say, is it unlike, utterly unlike? No, because they're both like in some way. So therefore it's analogical. Something to be univocal, that means when you're using a term, it's the same, simply the same. When I say a dog is a mammal, a camel is a mammal, simply the same. I mean they're simply the same. When I say they're analogous, I'm sorry. Equivocal. When I say they're equivocal, they're simply unsame. Simply unsame. Now the example I used the other night, you might remember, was a tick. A tick is a little insect. That's to say it's got a head, thorax, and abdomen, and 6 legs. But that's funny. My clock has ticks. There's no sameness whatsoever, is there? Simply unsame, you see? I know I was punning in the French language, much to the annoyance of some graduate students from the United States when I was in Canada. I remember them getting quite upset, and God, now he's even punning in French. Well, it's so easy to pun in French, so easy. It's such a language lends itself to that. A language like Dutch, there are men tell me who are Dutch that you can't pun in the Dutch language at all. There's practically no jokes, they said. But now I understand why the poor devils have that look on their faces. But no, it comes from a cold climate. But anyway, the language doesn't lend itself to that. I don't think German does either. But the what I know of it, but English you can pun because of a big Latin influence in the English language. If it's simply the same, the word being, when there are all these beings, these 10 modes of beings we spoke about before, if they're simply the same, then it's all just one world. There's nothing else other than that. And that's what some of the ancients thought. If it's equivocal, like tick, it has no likeness at all. But it is. The term being is analogous. Analogous. That means some sameness, but more unsameness. Some sameness, more unsameness. That's the proper notion of analogy. I used this example the other night. Supposing, like I remember playing a joke on some student when I was teaching in Ottawa, girl sitting in the front, lovely French-Canadian girl, and I said, "Look, what's that?" She said, "Look, out comes another one," and she ducked. Well, could you call that a being the same as you call a tree a being? There's some sameness, they both exist, but there's a greater unsameness. Could you say a cow is a being and a walk is a certain being? Remember, there are 10 modes of being. We call them modes because they're only analogically alike. 10 modes of being, and like those, one is a substance, one mode, the other 9 modes are accidents. Well, could you call a walk or Jenna the same, using the word being utterly the same? No. Is it utterly unsame? No. It's some sameness, but greater unsameness. That's analogy. Then there are 5 modes of analogy, but we needn't go into that. We may do that later on in the course. So the concept of being is analogous. I mentioned some lovely expressions of it. We could hardly speak without analogy. The human languages are full of analogies, beautiful analogies. Remember something there? Oh, we had a fierce wind. You can imagine the wind being fierce. We talk about taking everything in your stride. Well, you don't eat your food in your stride. We try to see through someone. Or we say Joe is a pompous ass, or something like that. Or a girl nestles in the arms of a boyfriend. Now, all of those are analogies. Nestles. Well, it's hardly a nest. I mean, it's his arms, not a nest. And you told you about that lad that was working for me, and he said, you've got to sweep the place to 4 decimal places in this place. He said, I remember going down in the bowels of the steamship Orsova, down in the bowels. So they're all analogies. So then, my friends, we come to chapter 5 on page 15, the division of being. Now we're coming to something now a little bit more meaty. We could have different kind of beings. How do you divide beings up in the world? First, there's real being. Then there's mental being. Beings that only can exist in the mind. Real beings, real comes from, it's rather a funny thing to have this word. It comes from the word res, meaning thing in Latin. So, a real being is a being that's out there, a thing outside the mind. That's a real being. Though some even have disputed that even the beings in the mind are real beings, as I said. That's all very well, but convention says we're talking about using the word about things outside the mind. There's substance, then there's accident. And there are 9 modes of accident. So that's real being. Mental being, there's an essential division, first of all. Positive, essential being. That is to say, for instance, relation. Here's a relation. I am seeing, he's being seen by me. That's a relation. I am near, I am far. They're relations. The mind grasps them. I've struggled with an engineer on one occasion. He said, oh, you don't need philosophy. That's there. And I said, oh? I looked at his finger. I said, I've never seen a there-ness. Where are they? You're localizing something in space. That's an intention of the mind, not an intention of the senses. There. Where's there-ness? I found engineers very difficult to argue with. I come from an engineering family. Very difficult. The inclined a little bit not to listen. Not in my own family, or my brother's a bit like that, but my dad certainly wasn't. But relation. Then there's another one, negative, called negation. For instance, if I said someone's sightless, someone's blind, that's a negation. That's an understanding, an expression of it. What can you see? You only see eyes. And, you know, the eyes of sightless people sometimes are very blank, naturally. But we understand it as something which they don't have, or a privation. A difference between a privation and negation is this. A negation is something you don't have. A privation is something you don't have which you ought to have. Privation is something you don't have which you ought to have. Negation is the lack of a good. Negation. Lack of a good. Privation. Lack of a due good. A good which is due to us, a good we ought to have. So blindness is a privation. And don't we use the word that way? Don't we say this? That poor devil's so deprived. When they haven't got enough money to feed themselves, and they ought to have that, we call it they're deprived. That's a privation. A sinful act is a privation. You're deprived of the due order to that act, what it ought to have, in keeping with the supreme rule of the moral order, which is, Mr. Killian?
Human nature adequately understood.
Give him an A+. Human nature adequately understood. That's the measure of the moral order, ultimately. Or you could go further and say it's in keeping with the nature of God, not the will of God. That's a terrible heresy, a great error, to say it's in keeping with the will of God, as if God could say, oh, I decided to make, let me see, adultery. I can make it a good act or a bad. Oh, I'll make it a bad act. No, it's naturally evil. And that's what we're saying. But we can't be examining the nature of God all the time, so we have to have a ready rule of thumb close to us. And all through the ages, the 10 Commandments are rules of thumb. They're not religious things which the ACLU of America, the Anti-American Civil Liberties Union, you missed it. The anti-American...
No, we didn't.
They think that 10 Commandments are religious. No, they're not. The natives operate in various civilizations according to them. Love your neighbour and love God. They operate according to them, with more or less perfection, of course. It took the divine revelation to give us certitude about those things. The philosopher can have certitude, but as St. Thomas says in the first question of the Summa, he says, not everybody can be a philosopher. That's why the 10 Commandments were revealed, because not everybody can be a philosopher, and we have to be certain about some things. So anyway, so privation means you're deprived of something. It's a special mode of negation. So that's the essential division, positive or negative, of mental beings. Now, mental beings, there's an accidental. Those which are based on the real, blindness, evil, darkness, privation, they're properly called mental beings. Or those which are fictitious beings, not based on the reality. Square circle. Square circles can't exist, but we can have a concept of square circle. We can't have an image of it. It's impossible. We can have a concept. Vast difference between an image and a concept, as we show in philosophical psychology. There are about 20 differences. Extraordinary number of differences. So, rational brute, a rational dog. I wish to goodness biologists would learn some of this. I heard it during the week. I'm one of those people that might sleep in all day long and then sit up from 2 till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning watching television or reading a book or listening to music or something, especially after giving a lecture at night. They found at Ottawa it took 3 hours for teachers to settle down after giving a lecture. I gave 3 hours, which was what we're supposed to do. Most men only gave 2 or 2.5 hours, one night a week. That was apart from day lectures, of course. In any case, I hear biologists on television, and those men are lost. They're rediscovering things they think that were solved 25 centuries ago, my friends. They are appallingly ignorant. I've heard men say this. This is one of the most greatest laughing things in the world. St. Thomas says, for instance, never mind by whom something is said, it's what is said that is important. But they say St. Thomas just devised a philosophy to preserve Christianity, to protect the church. That is so childish, I can hardly believe that a scholar would make such a statement. So, there we are. There's the basic division of beings. You can't go outside that. There's nothing outside it. When you want to divide something up perfectly, this is the way you do it. And I'm going to divide the class up. Oh, there it is. When you want to divide something up perfectly, you divide through contradictories. You divide through, say, something, let's say, yes and no. You might divide this up, and you might divide this up. You divide this up. You divide this up through yes and no. The ancients used to say per sic et non. Per sic, sic in Latin is the word for yes. You've seen in in literature at some time or another when somebody's written some uproariously stupid thing or something like that, and the editor will put in brackets, sick. It means, yes, he did say that. That's what it means. Now let me show how this can be practical. We'll divide the class up. Class. Into Jenna and non-Jenna. Not Jenna, if you like. Is that how you spell your name? So Jenna and not Jenna. Unfortunately, I don't know names of the class. Not Jenna, divide up to Al, say Mr. Killian, and not Mr. Killian. And not Mr. Killian, divide up into sister, and not sister. The basic principle of all philosophy is nothing can be and not be at the same time, under the same respect. That's the supreme principle of all thinking. So we're dividing through being, non-being, being, non-being, being, non-being, through contradictories. It's a perfect division that way. So if we want to divide the class up, Jenna, not Jenna. Joe, not Joe. Ted, not Ted. Betty, not Betty, etc. That way. Divide the whole class up that way. That's the perfect way of division. So that's how how beings are divided up. And I've got here also the distinction between, in the real beings, what actually exists. And there's another division there, which is called modal division, modes of being. And I'll show you how that works. We have possible beings. That which can be. Impossible being. That which cannot be. That's an impossible being. Then these are all divided through the mode of be note. Then there's contingent being. Contingent being. That which can be and necessary. That which can be not, I think is the best way to put this, can be not, that which can not be not, put it that way. A necessary being cannot not be, it must be. It cannot be not. I've expressed it, there's different ways you can express it. Let me see which way I've expressed it in here. Yeah, I think that's the way I put it here. I've done it the same way. That which cannot, then the contingent is that which can be not. It may be, it may not be. That's another way of putting it. May or may not be. This one must be. Another way of expressing it. Be careful in any discussion. It's a very useful thing to know about the difference between something being contingent and something which being necessary. There are people who miss that in discussion. I've seen it again and again and again. The distinction between what is necessarily true and what may be true, not necessarily true. So you're right down in the heart of being at the moment. We've got to get all these concepts cleared up before we start studying what unity is, what truth is, and the different modes of truth, what beauty is, what goodness is, and the different modes of goodness, what evil is, and what different modes of evil. We're going to study those things. But we've got to get these fundamental things cleared up. And I was going to do something special tonight, but I didn't do it. I thought periodically what I'm going to do is dedicate one half of the class to something special, applying it in political theory or social theory or something else, or in human affairs or something like that, or in something else. I thought just to make life just a little interesting. This is how we grew up. The first course I took in philosophical psychology was 1 year long. 3 terms to the year, and that's much longer than 2 semesters. When I came to North America and I had to teach 1 semester course, I said, my God, I got a what? I couldn't believe it. I didn't know about them. I did. I knew from my studies in Montreal that they taught these. But we were advanced levels. It was all postgraduate level. That was a different matter. But when I had to teach undergraduates 1 semester in philosophical psychology, I couldn't believe it at first. So it forces you to see the essential stuff, the essential and basic stuff that you can get through to the people. And we didn't do a bad job, did we, sister? You know, we studied that. Then the same with ethics. That's a pretty vast course. But periodically, Woodbury would stop or he'd just branch and show us some application of something, of what we were studying, and made it very interesting. We'll do that as we go along. So, the possible is a being which is not divided against itself. It does not contain within itself contradiction. Now notice this. A student once asked, can God make a rock too big for himself to lift? That's absurd. It's a nonsensical question. But the young mind didn't see that. No, God can't. And the defect is not in him, the defect is in the question. Can we have a non-rational man? A man that does not have intellect? No. The very concept of a man has intellect. Can we make a rational dog? No. God can't do that, because that's asking God to do something that's foolish, something that's non-rational. The fault is not in him, but in the thing itself. Understand that. So the question, the famous question of the possible, what makes something possible? Yet, Dr., we'll call him X, went through a very wonderful, great institute in this world, and he came out of that and said, I've never heard of that problem, the problem of the possible. He came and asked me, what is this problem of the possibles? The possible is what makes something possible that is non-contradictory in itself. Nothing can be and not be at the same time. So a being can't be and not be at the same time. That would be absurd. And as I said, the defect is in the things themselves. God can make a tree because there's no contradiction within tree. He can make a tree 1,000 feet tall. There's no contradiction in that. But make a tree which has 2 heads and 3 intellects, that's just absurd to ask him to do something like that. Now we come, my friends, to the biggest question in philosophy. There are 3 great questions in philosophy. We're on chapter 5 on page 16. There are 3 great questions in philosophy. All human knowledge boils down to these 3. But we'll take them one at a time. We're not in the position to understand them yet. By the way, are there any questions? It is a good idea, the students have asked me this, to say this, to keep questions to the end, unless it's something that clarifies something we're just dealing with there, right now. If you miss a point or something, or could you say more about that, or something like that, please feel free to say that. But generally, it's because we're recording, you see, with the microphone here, that it's better for continuity of the matter if we keep our questions till the end or something like that. But generally, if there's something, though, that needs clarifying, please feel free to ask. But don't be afraid to ask any question you want to ask. If I can't answer it, I'll get an answer for you somehow. The See, does this make sense? I think I read this last time. The elephant is a dainty bird. It flits from bough to bough. It makes its nest in a rhubarb tree and whistles like a cow. I'm ashamed to say I've misspelled something there. Yes. So I'll have to correct that. So now we ask ourselves, what are the principles that make beings up? You know, there's one and there's many. There's being and there's become. How does this happen? We saw making coffee tonight, putting heat, and it goes from non-hot to hot. What are the basic principles of being that allow change, allow multiplicity, etc.? This is the biggest question in all of philosophy. By the way, I was at McGill University, and a professor there had to present a paper on something. And I was asked to do the commentary. We often do this. Somebody presents a paper and somebody either takes an opposite view or maybe do a commentary. Well, I was asked a commentary on this. I can't think of his name now. And somebody in the audience stood up and says, what's all this talk of, this is a professor of philosophy, what's all this talk about analogy? They're all just beings, that's all. Professor Charette, Léon Charette from our faculty says, but they're all different, aren't they? Oh, yes. That's what analogy is. Likeness, yet unlikeness. Oh, is that what it means? He said and sat down. I couldn't believe it. That was a professor of philosophy, probably with a doctorate. What's all this talk about analogy? He said. They're all just beings. They're all alike, aren't they? Somebody said. He said, yes. And Dr. Charette said, but yet they're all different, aren't they? Yes. Well, that's what analogy is, he said. Dear oh dear. So, the fact on the top of page 17. Nearly every philosopher is urged to think about multiplicity and change. Parmenides and Heraclitus, the two Greek philosophers, saw the problem and tried to solve it. Remember what I said last time. Never deny one term of a problem to save the other. For instance, you say, man is one thing, yet I see many men in front of me. Being exists, yet there's change. Don't deny one of those problems to save terms to save the other. Either they're one or many, saw these men, but they're both. But how? That has to be solved. Aristotle solved that. And Aristotle, since these men, one denied the senses, the other denied the intellect. And you'll find this in your studies, I'm sure, later it'll come, that it'll be brought up. In any good course, Parmenides and Heraclitus should be discussed. Some of these men, do you know how much we've got? Half a page of their writings. And do you know how much we have of a certain other man? I love Anaxagoras, yet it's most obscure. We've only got about a page and a half of his writings, fragments, and they're incomplete. I've got them all, by the way, in books, of course, but some of them, we have nothing of their writing. We deduce what they said from the writings of Plato and the writings of Aristotle and other writers. They refer to them, refer to their problem. That's how we know about it. It's fascinating to study some of these. And we've got books you can buy them with fragments of the various fragments. They're all numbered, they're all categorized, etc. So Aristotle gave another explanation that these men missed. It's called the doctrine of potency and act. Aristotle said, for any change, we require three things. Act, potency, or actuality and potentiality, if you like. And he spoke of matter and form. Now, for instance, water goes from cold to hot. So it has to have matter, the water, and a form, or say this form, a potentiality for a new form. Matter, form and a potentiality for a new form. So form and matter are involved, either cold or hot, and a potentiality for a new form. That's Aristotle's solution. We, potency, and act is what we call it. Others call it actuancy, actuality, and all sorts of things. I don't know why they unnecessarily complicate things, but act and potency. That's the solution. If you wanted to write the whole of philosophy, as I said last class, on the back of a postage stamp, my students have tried to pull this one on me in Ottawa, you write potency and act on the back of a postage stamp. And I said, well, I give you full marks for writing that, but I'll fail you because it's only a penny stamp, it's cheap. They enjoyed the joke. So the 7, I was teaching, I think I had about 7 nurses or something, male nurses. The rest, I had about 125 nurses, and the rest spread over 2 classes, and the rest were female. They were wonderful students. Some of them, in Canada this was, some of the most wonderful students I've ever taught. So, what happened to the form? What happened to the form of coldness? Well, supposing it went from hot to cold. Where did the form go? Hotness. Where did the coldness go? Did somebody sit around here on the floor? It's an accidental being. Accidents can only exist in substance. It couldn't have flown out. We say that this one is reduced into the potency of the matter. This one is educed. Ducere. Whoops, what am I doing? Sorry, my writing's so bad there. Ducere in Latin means to lead. Lead out. Ex. Exit. Where's an exit? Exit. It in Latin means goes. He goes. Ex means out, to go out. So E, which is the same as X, it means it's led out of the potency of the water. The hotness is let out by the potency of the water. This is reduced. Re in Latin means back or again, has those 2 meanings. Back or again. So here it means led back into the potency of the water. But it can only do that by something which is actual. We're going to see how important that is. A lot of people in contemporary philosophy miss that. This can take place only because something is actually hot. You can't heat water with something which is potentially hot, but something which is actually hot. So the 2 principles, potency and act, are what allow change and what allow multiplicity. So keep that in mind, my friends. Potency and act. That was Harry Stottle, the son of Mr. and Mrs. Stottle. He's the one that saw this. And clear thinking. That man's mind was so great. So great. It's quite interesting, by the way, to read things that I'd always studied, but had never seen it in him, in his De Partibus Animalium, concerning the parts of animals. In other words, he's talking about the various types of animals, etc., and things that happen with animals, concerning animal life. And he said, all sounds of animals are passion sounds. I wish to goodness biologists would read that. All sounds of animals are passion sounds. And they're all about 2 things. Eaties and sexies. Food and sex. Beautifully said. When I first saw that, I felt a rise of joy within me, you know. It's such a beautiful truth. Truth has that effect on you when you really see a great truth. You know? And like that letter on his work on what you might call astronomy in St. Thomas. He said, they talked about the epicycles, etc., but someday there may be another system of physics which explains what we see. In other words, science is not fixed. some of the rubbish I've read written by scientists, some of the biggest rubbish you ever read are written usually by physicians, I find. Like this physician that sneered at the idea we were putting on a symposium on the existence of God at Niagara University. Remember this, my friends, those people are speaking out of their field. If a psychologist said there's no soul, he's wrong. If he says there is a soul, he's still wrong. He's outside his field. It's not his business to speak on that. You're like the fellow that said you can't be certain of anything. He was certain of that. Well, you remember I told you that. I've told you that story, I think. Like the young lad had brought in to meet me at Montreal when I was a senior student, and a junior Australian student was there staying with us at the time. This lad said, "I don't think you'd be certain of anything." I said, "You're pretty certain of that." "No, I'm not. You can't be certain of anything." "Anything at all?" "No. But you're certain that you're not certain of that." So we went on. Finally, I trapped him. I said, "Wait there, James." I said, "Just a minute now. I'm all mixed up." I was pretending, of course. "You're saying you can be certain. I'm saying that you're saying you can be certain. I'm saying you can be uncertain." He said, "So you're certain of the difference?" Walked right into my trap. So this, my friends, potency and act. Aristotle saw that the human intellect is potential towards all bodily things. This is what Anaxagoras hinted at. He didn't spell it out the same way that Aristotle did. The human intellect is potential to all bodily things. I can have in my intellect tree, cow, dog, stone, Jenna, desk. My intellect is not fixed in any way. Therefore, as we show, and I'll show this later, therefore there's no matter in the intellect. Therefore it can't disintegrate. Therefore it must be immaterial, utterly immaterial. Therefore it's immortal. Therefore there's life after death. Aristotle saw that. The ancient philosopher, Plato saw that. That's why Socrates drank the hemlock. He said, "Aren't we made for another world?" This is not Christian teaching, this is philosophical teaching. You see, there are a group of about 5 concepts in theological teaching which are presupposed from philosophical teaching. The existence of God, that's not religion, but the ACLU thinks it is. That's something that's a conclusion of philosophy. And we'll see that. Oh boy, will we. I'll make sure we see that. Well, it looks like the time is up, but potency and act, think about that. The power of sight is potential towards all colours. The intellect's potential towards all being. It's the very faculty of being. Hearing is potential towards sounds, within a given range, because after all, this is only material, the organ, limited by the range of the organ, etc. All these things are based upon potency and act. So, we'll have a lot to say about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.